So please go wild, go crazy, and welcome to the stage the wonderful Captain Kate McCue!
Thank you so much for giving up your pool chairs to come down and do our talk. Now this is, we call it our Oceans Ahead presentation, but I do it in a little bit of a different way because I want to give you some personal information and also share some information about this incredible ship. So we're going to have a question and answer session at the end of this presentation, and the way that works is I'm going to have the questions and you're going to have the answers. Sound good? Now, if you have any questions, we'll just have you raise your hand, let us know where you're from, and you can ask a question. The only thing that I do request is if you have a very technical question. For example, how many RPMs when we're headed downhill at 15 knots with a side beam wind of 23 knots? If you could save those kind of questions until the end, when we run out of time, that would be just phenomenal. All right, we're going to kick this off, and I have my lovely assistant Tanya here running our presentation. The very first picture, how does one become a cruise ship captain? I'm going to tell you my story. And it begins on the great big red boat, the Atlantic, with Premier Cruise Lines. I have one nod in the front. Anyone else ever heard of Premier Cruise Lines? If you haven't, it's the original Disney cruise line. What they would do is they would have a park and sail. So you would either go to the parks first and then hop on the ship, or you go on the ship and then go to the Disney parks. Well, when I was 12 years old, my parents took my brother and me on our very first big vacation that we'd had as a family. It was over Thanksgiving holiday. It was a 4-day cruise to the Bahamas. And in the top right-hand corner is the Junior Cruiser certificate that I received from the captain. And this certificate still hangs on the bulkhead of my office today. It made such an impression on me. In the next picture, I'll show you. This was when we were packing the car to drive home, and I had this pivotal conversation with my parents, my dad in particular, because I had such a wonderful time on the ship. And so when we were packing the car to drive home, I said to my dad, I know what I want to be when I grow up. My dad said, what's that? I said, you know the person that plans all the fun events on board the ship? My dad said, the cruise director? I said, yes, I want to be the cruise director. And he said, well, you can do anything you want in the world, including drive the thing. And that's where the seed was planted. Now, a couple of things I want to point out in these pictures. You see my brother and I are rocking our San Francisco 49ers jackets. They're playing today. If you heard the announcement against the Seahawks, so go Niners. They haven't been doing so great, but my family, we were all from California. My brother and I were born in San Francisco, but we moved around a lot when we were growing up. We lived in California, Michigan, Georgia, Texas, Las Vegas is where we ended up. But when we were in this picture, we were still living in Augusta, Georgia, so not very close to the sea, but the allure of the sea and the romanticism and just the adventure that we experienced on that 4-day cruise really resonated with me in particular. The left-hand picture, that is my older brother, and the reason that I put this photo up is because it's the most awkward photo I have of my older brother. Sibling rivalry is a real thing. He has grown into that nose, I'm happy to say. Just behind us, you'll see the red and white stripes. That is our waiter, Pascal. Now, I tell the story about how I wanted to go to sea because my dad said I could do anything, including drive a ship. But the real reason I wanted to come to sea was to find our waiter, Pascal, who I fell madly in love with. Funny thing about that, I did my presentation 2 cruises ago, and as I stood on the gangway saying goodbye to our guests, a gentleman passed by and he said, I'm friends with Pascal. I said, no, that's not possible. He said, absolutely, and his wife, who was working on the ship at the time, I said, just tell him to call me. So we have located Pascal, the mystery is solved, but that is where the seed was planted and why I wanted to go to sea in the first place. Now, where does one go from a childhood dream? In the next photo, when it was time to apply to college. My dad reminded me of that conversation because I wasn't aware of where to go and what to study. And here's the thing, my dad had wanted to go to a maritime academy and go to sea, but he went into the Peace Corps where he met my mom in Ethiopia, and when they came back from Ethiopia, my dad applied at California Maritime Academy to be a cadet, and California Maritime Academy at the time, back in the late 60s, early 70s, said he was too old to apply. So it had always been at the back of my dad's brain, but he had done the legwork, he'd done the research, where to go, what to study. So when it was time to choose a college, he recommended California Maritime Academy because all of my family was back in California. I didn't know port from starboard, bow from stern. The only thing I knew is every year we would go on a training cruise, which sounded very exciting, as I linked it to this cruise that I went on with Premier Cruise Line. Very, very different story though. But I got accepted to California Maritime Academy, which is part of the California State University system since 1996 when I started going there. And what that means is it's a regular four-year university. The full name is California Maritime Academy Vallejo, California State University Vallejo, California Maritime Academy. So with a four-year university, it means I got a business administration degree with a minor in marine transportation after the 4 years, and I got a third mate unlimited license, which meant I could sail anything from a tugboat to the world's largest supertanker and everything in between. And at the time, I couldn't get a degree without getting my license. I couldn't get a license without getting my degree. And the idea was, when I go to sea as a career, if I wanted to work on land down the road, when I retired from sea, I had this business degree to fall back on. Fantastic idea. And it not only comes in handy for when you're at sea, or when you're working on land rather, but as a captain on board a ship, you're like the CEO on board. So you're basically running a $1.3 billion business, because that's what this ship cost. So business degree came in very, very handy. I was one of 8 women in my graduating class of over 100. I was a minority in the school, but I was always treated like a younger sister or a mother figure at school. Very, very protected, great environment. And while we were at the school, we would go on these training cruises on the training ship Golden Bear, which was stationed at the school. And this was every summer, so while our regular college friends were going on these great summer vacations, we were hopping on a ship. But we were going to places like Nuka Hiva, Palmyra, South America. So by the time that I graduated, I'd already been to many countries that were already on my bucket list. And that's where you figure out if you really want to go to sea. Because a lot of people get on a ship and figure out pretty quickly that that's not the career that they want to have. But for me, it just reaffirmed the fact that I wanted to go to sea. When I graduated, actually I should say, in between our training cruises, we would go on a commercial cruise. So we got to pick a company based on our GPA. Well, the cruise ship companies always went to those top GPA performers. I'm not going to lie, I was kind of middle of the road. So I got banana boats. Does anyone know anything about banana boats? We were taking bananas, we were picking them up in Guayaquil, Ecuador, and bringing them back to Long Beach, California. Now when we would get to Guayaquil, Ecuador, we would open up the cargo hatches, we would load the green bananas into the cargo hatches bunch by bunch, close the cargo hatches, and then basically suck out the oxygen, pump in CO2 to keep the bananas green and keep them from ripening as we sailed back up to California. Once we got to Long Beach, we would open up those cargo hatches, the warm California air would get into those cargo hatches, and the bananas would start to dance. Do you know why bananas dance? Spiders about this big. Snakes about this wide. That's when I really figured out I wanted to be on cruise ships. In the next picture, when I graduated in 2000, I applied to every single cruise line in the industry. I sent my resume via snail mail and email, which back in 2000 was still a newfangled thing. Kids, it hasn't been around forever. So I didn't hear anything back for 18 months. I changed my resume eventually to apply to be a bartender on Disney Cruise Line, just to get my foot in the door. Disney Cruise Line got my resume, they looked at it, they said, well, she's not qualified to be a bartender because I had never served a drink a day in my life, but she is qualified to drive our ships. Go figure. So they sent my resume to the proper people. I got hired as an entry position as a third mate on board on board Disney. Now the problem with Disney at the time, they only had 2 ships, the Tragic and the Blunder. I'm just kidding. They had beautiful ships. But because they only had 2, it meant there wasn't a lot of room for growth and promotion. Whereas a company like Royal Caribbean was building the Voyager class, they were building the Brilliance class or the Radiance class. So a lot of the people I knew in the industry, they were moving up, and they were moving up quickly. So I applied to Royal Caribbean on a Tuesday, and I heard back almost immediately, and they said, unfortunately, we don't have any openings at this time. On Saturday, that same Saturday, they contacted me and said, can you join the Nordic Empress tomorrow in St. Maarten? So I went over to Royal Caribbean and I joined and I sailed as second officer, first officer deck, first officer navigation, first officer safety, chief officer safety, and staff captain over 13 years on several different ships. And I was sailing with my husband, who was chief engineer on the Quantum of the Seas. We were off the coast of Oman when he got a phone call early in the morning. He came into the bedroom, he said, you have a phone call from Celebrity Cruises. I said, well, why would Celebrity Cruises be calling me? He said, well, it's Lisa Lutoff-Perlo, who is our president and CEO at Celebrity, who I had met when she was in charge of Marine over at Royal Caribbean. He said, I think they're calling to offer you the position as a captain. Well, that'll wake you up pretty quick. So I get up, I take the phone call, and sure enough, it was Lisa, and she was asking if I would come over to Celebrity as their first female captain, and that makes me the first American, both North and South, woman to captain mega cruise ships. Now, thank you. Now, that had always been my dream to be the first. I didn't think anybody else would care about that, and I'll talk about that in a second. But when I took that phone call, I asked Lisa, because she said, we're going to keep it under wraps until we make an official announcement around June, July. And I said, well, can I have one request and just tell my parents? And she said, absolutely, I'll do one better. And what she did is she wrote me an email. And she sent it to me why I was being asked to come over to Celebrity and be their first female captain. And so on Father's Day of that year, I printed off the email. I got a nice bottle of Dom, and I was over at my parents' house, and I gave my dad the printed letter as I'm popping this bottle of champagne, and my dad's reading everything out loud, and when he got to the part about captain, he looks up at me and says, Captain? Looks back down at the paper, up at me again, starts bawling. My poor mom sitting next to her eating ice cream has no idea what's happening. But it was a very, very proud moment, and one that I'm very thankful to Lisa and Celebrity for giving me, because it had always been my dad's dream a little bit, and now I get to live that out as well. So, wait, go back. We've got Mom and Dad in there. There we go. Mom and Dad, bottom right-hand corner. Now, a lot of people will ask, does your family get to come sail with you? Absolutely. Do we like them to? No. It is a lot of work. Now I say that, but my family is amazing, and they understand that my job is 24/7. If I'm going to be needed, it's usually 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. 24/7 I have to be available, so they understand that. But the thing about my parents, when they come to sail, they are the albatross. Something happens every single time. I don't mean it's one hurricane, it's 2 in the same cruise. My mom did a wicked class of Zumba, got her intestines twisted. I had to leave her in Barbados for 3 weeks while she had an operation. We've had pets that passed away while they were on board. My best friend's parents were sailing with my mom and dad. When my best friend's father found out he had pancreatic cancer, he's okay, but I blame my parents entirely for that. So I have told them, as much as I love them, if they come and sail and one more thing goes wrong, that's the end of their sailing career. So that's Mom and Dad. In the next picture is this lovely name tag. Captain's wife, not your typical person in the next photo. This is the captain's wife, big, bald, beautiful man. That is my chief engineer husband. We met at Royal Caribbean when he was a staff chief engineer. That was the second in command to the chief engineer. I was a first officer. And there's very few people in your life when you meet them that you can remember every single thing about that moment, whether it was the sights, the sounds, what you were wearing, the exact words that were said between you. My husband is that person. And our very first date, he asked me, when I got off watch at midnight, to put on a boiler suit and meet him up by the kids' club. Now, as dodgy as that sounds, I was all too keen. So midnight rolls around, I throw on a boiler suit, I go running up to the kids' club. He had me climb up the ship's stack, and if you're familiar with Royal Caribbean ships, they have the Viking crown. And at the very top of the stack, he blindfolded me, had me slide down the stained glass windows of the chapel, and on top of the Viking crown, he had taken down a blanket, he had a bucket with champagne and strawberries and under the Caribbean stars with the Dancing with the Stars going on underneath, so we had nice music. That was our first date. Yeah, you clap. But when you set the bar quite literally that high, there is no place to go but down. So we have been married now 16 very happy years, and I say very happy years because the secret to a happy marriage is never be in the same place at the same time. Some of our most fond memories are when I was sailing in Australia, he was in the Caribbean. It was about 12 time zones apart. But the evolution of communication has gone so well over the period that we have been sailing. When we first started sailing, we were sending telex messages at $7 a word. Yes. Now, of course, we have Starlink on board our ships. We have social media. We have FaceTime. And we actually communicate at least twice a day. In the morning, we'll FaceTime, and then in the evening, we recap the day of FaceTime. I do the same thing with my parents. I call them every single day. So the evolution of technology has made life very, very easy to be at sea. So that is my husband. But the true love of my life, next. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is not the world's ugliest chihuahua. That is a cat. That is my cat, Bug Naked. And the reason that I have Bug Naked, when I first became a captain, during my very first contract, I found out how lonely it could be, because you are the boss on board. And you have to have certain distances between people. And other captains in our company, they'll have their wives and their children sail with them their entire cruise, or their entire contracts, which we do 3 months on board the ship, and then we're on vacation for 3 months. I don't know how anybody could live with somebody for 3 months on board the ship and not kill them. So I said to my husband, he has a choice. I can either get a pet or a boyfriend. Up to him. He said go for the pet. So when I presented this to the company and I said I'd like to have a pet, they said no. And I said, well, over at Royal Caribbean, Captain Johnny had a parrot. Captain Sparrow had 2 cats, and I know of another captain that had a dog on board. And they said, okay, what would you like? I said, a monkey. I have that lined up, by the way. They said, no, what else would you like? So I was scrolling through Instagram, and I saw hairless cats, Sphinx cats in particular. I became obsessed, and I thought this would be a great travel companion, hypoallergenic, all of that jazz. And so Bug joined me when she was 3 months old. She has sailed with me on every ship. Today, she is almost 7 years old. Her birthday is March 20th. She is a companion, and she does make a big difference on board the ship, and not just on our regular contracts. During the lockdown, we said goodbye to our guest on March 15th of 2020, and we expected to see everybody back in 2 weeks. Well, we all know how that went. I was on board the ship on Celebrity Edge for 312 days straight. It was phenomenal. It was really, really great. But having her on board the entire time made things a lot easier. Not only for me, I don't say she's an emotional support animal, but in fact she is, because what I found is we've had instances where crew members were very homesick, or crew members were down in the medical facility, and if I take her down and hand her over to somebody, you see them instantly relax. So she does have that capability. We also call her the maneuvering support mammal. And the reason that we do that is because when I give the maneuver to one of my junior officers, say it's their very first time undocking the ship, Bug has this way of picking up that anxiety, and what she'll do is she'll come out of our room, which is attached to the bridge, and she will stand next to the person that's performing the maneuver. And I've had my officers say they can physically feel the anxiety leaving their body as she's standing there. She doesn't talk, she doesn't make any noise, she doesn't jump on buttons, but she does help them in a very unusual and unique way. So that is Bug. And if you'd like to see Bug, she will be in the club today at 4 p.m. You'll see her in the flesh, quite literally, for Bug Trivia. So come on out at 4 o'clock. All right, in the next picture, let's talk about, would you like to see where we live? This video was actually made on Celebrity Edge, which is the sister ship to Celebrity Beyond, but very similar cabin. The only thing that's different is the artwork, but we can show you what it looks like.
So this is the captain's cabin on the Celebrity Edge. I'm going to show you, first things first, the bathroom. Bathroom leads into the photo bathroom here. We have the bathtub,
Tubs for Bug.
shower, bedroom. There's the TV, the corridor that we just came from, coming into the living room. Beautiful space, love the artwork, and we have not one but 2 infinite balconies. There's the TV, of course you gotta have a pantry, and then my office, which leads directly to the bridge.
Pretty sweet, right? So the Celebrity Edge is the only class of ship in our fleet where the captain's cabin is attached directly to the bridge. The great thing about that is I can get from my bed to the center cockpit in less than 12 seconds. The bad thing about that is I can never use the excuse that I was stuck in traffic if I'm late to work. So there you go. All right, I think it's time to talk about this incredible ship. So we're going to start off with one of the defining features of Celebrity Edge class, and that is the parabolic ultra bow. Now, I could explain it, but I also made a very easy to understand TikTok, so I think we'll roll that video and show you what it's all about.
The Celebrity Edge has a parabolic ultra bow, or some refer to it as an X bow or an inverted bow. It's a refined concept of a bulbous bow, which has been commonly used on cruise ships for efficiency since the 1980s. We still have a baby bulb, but by wrapping the open space between the bulbous bow and the hull with steel, the ship is not as dependent on the factor of draft, or how deep the vessel sits in the water, which was previously a huge consideration with traditional bulbous bows. Our bow is literally cutting edge as we move through the water smoother, more comfortably, more fuel efficient, and in my opinion, pretty looking.
True story. So I don't know if anyone noticed yesterday while we were docked alongside MSC. MSC has a traditional bow with a bulbous bow. Did anybody take a look? And you saw the water kind of splashing. So because they have that indentation between the bow and the bulbous bow, when you're sailing, you can get a lot of friction, you can get a lot of movement, you can get a lot of disturbance. With a parabolic ultra bow, again, as I mentioned in the video, it doesn't matter how deep we sit in the water. Because it's razor sharp, we basically just slice through the water. And there isn't that area for that disturbance to happen when the sea is slapping the ship. So what's old is new again. This is not a new feature on ships. This goes back many, many years, but it is quite a new feature relatively on cruise ships. But because it has been proven to be more fuel efficient, safer, and smoother, this is what you're going to continue to see on the ships that we produce, especially from Celebrity Cruises and Royal Caribbean. I believe the first ship that they have coming out with the parabolic ultra bow will be the largest ship in the world, the Icon of the Seas, which is being built in Turku, Finland right now. So that is a little bit about the bow. In the next picture, just after the bow, in the bottom right-hand side of that picture, you'll see 4 circles. Those are our bow thrusters. Bow thrusters are propellers that are in tunnels in the forward section of the ship that are used to move the bow from side to side. 19,500 horsepower between all 4 bow thrusters makes that happen. On the stern, on the other hand, at the opposite end, the next photo, we have something called azipods, azimuthing pods. This is on all Celebrity Cruise ships. We do not have a traditional propeller with a shaft that runs through the engine room. What we have are 2 completely independent units that can turn 360 degrees. Because we have these on the stern, we don't need stern thrusters. And the way that azipods, the theory is, wherever the blade is pointed is where the ship's stern will go. So for example, the bow is located right here. The azipods right now, the blades are pointing forward. They are pulling us through the water rather than pushing us through the water. If I wanted the stern to go to starboard or the right-hand side, all I have to do is move the propeller so that the blade point to the right and the stern will go to starboard. Very, very maneuverable, and you can see their size by the gentleman that's located directly underneath them. Those are the azipods. That was actually on the Celebrity Edge. But we have these 2 independent units that make it very, very nice to maneuver. It's a good luxury to have. In the next picture, the bridge. Now in the top left-hand corner, that is the bridge of the training ship Golden Bear at California Maritime Academy. I took this photo in 2018 when I went back to school, but when I was in school, we had radars with grease pencils. GPS was this newfangled thing. We had Loran C, we had paper charts. A lot of things have changed since then. The bridge has been updated, but the one thing that's not been updated is there's only 1 chair on the bridge, and that is for the captain. You never sat in the captain's chair. But now they've got ECTIS, they've got electronic chart systems, they've got GPS, no grease pencils on the radars. But bottom right-hand corner is the bridge of Celebrity Beyond. Now, Celebrity Beyond, very technologically advanced. We are the most technologically advanced ship in our fleet. We do not carry paper charts any longer. All of our paper charts have been scanned, digitized, and put into the computer. And now what we do is we say, we want to go from point A to point B. It draws a red dotted line in the computer. We double check to make sure it's not going over any land, because we're not capable of that. If we engage the computer to do the driving, it will keep us on top of that red dotted line plus or minus 3 meters. That's about 9 feet at all times. But what that means is the ship is constantly fighting the elements in order to stay that precise. Now we can use the elements to our advantage from time to time, whether it's the wind or the currents. Even if it takes us a little off of course, we can still go with those elements and it'll save us some fuel. So for that reason, we tend to use autopilot more than we use the ECDIS. Autopilot, what we do is we put in the course, but the wind and currents could take us off that course, so the bridge officers are making sure we're always headed in the right direction and close to our intended course. With the ship's wheel, we do have a ship's wheel on board. It's not the big Christopher Columbus spoken wheel any longer. It's actually smaller than the wheel in your car. And fun fact, all of the wheels on Celebrity Cruises ships are made out of wood. Do you know why? We are a very superstitious bunch. And you know the saying, knock on wood if you need some luck? When you look at our bridge, very technologically advanced, a lot of steel, a lot of aluminum, no wood unless it's the furniture. So having the ship's wheel as wood means that we always have something to knock on for good luck. We only use the wheel going in and out of port because our courses and our itineraries, a lot of very straight lines, and our bridge watches, they do 4 hours on and 8 hours off. And if you're the helmsman and you have to stay on the same course for 4 hours, it's really boring. So we use autopilot most of the time when we're in open ocean and only go into hand steering using the helm when we're picking up the pilot just before we're doing the docking and undocking. Now, speaking of the docking and undocking, I mentioned yesterday the pilot and what their purpose is on board the ship. They do not maneuver this vessel. They do not maneuver any of our Celebrity Cruise ships because it's so much fun to do ourselves. And it does give us a lot of practice because what we were finding is many years ago, the second in command, the staff captain, was being promoted to the captain. And when they took over as captain, they had never maneuvered the ship before because only the captain was doing the maneuvering. So now what we do is we train all of our crew members, our bridge team, from the time that they come in as third officer, they get their hands-on practical experience. So by the time they're promoted to captain, they have hundreds of arrivals and departures under their belt. But back to the pilot. We will pick up the pilot at the sea buoy. We bring them up to the bridge. We give them a briefing on the ship. Now, most of the pilots that we have, because we have repeat ports, they've been on our ships before. They're familiar with where the equipment is located. And what we do is we give them the information, and then we can hand the con to them, the conduct of the vessel. That means that they're the ones that is giving the person on the helm the orders of what to steer. If for some reason I feel that it's not a safe situation that they're putting us into, I will take the con back because my name is the name that's on the bottom of all the paperwork. I have not had to do that with the pilots that we work with. Are complete professionals. They're wonderful people, and we all have the same result or end result, which is to get the ship safely alongside the pier or to depart safely. So that's the purpose of the pilot. Once we're alongside, the pilot will disembark, and then just before departure, they come back. They ride with the ship until we pass the sea buoy. Pilot comes alongside. They climb off the ladder, and off they go. The bridge watches I mentioned, we have different conditions: red, yellow, and green. When we're in open ocean, we're far away from land, we don't have very much traffic around, visibility is good, weather conditions are good, we're in green condition. That means we have an officer of the watch, assistant officer of the watch, and a quartermaster on the bridge. So there's always a minimum of 3 people up there. Now, when one of those conditions changes, we go into yellow condition, and we add an additional senior officer. Could be myself, my second in command, or the third in command, and an additional lookout. So now there's 5 people on the bridge. Going in and out of port, we have a minimum of 7 people. Captain, staff captain, officer of the watch, assistant officer of the watch, quartermaster, lookout, and the pilot. It's a party up there. But once we're alongside, we step back down to green condition. So we always have the available power on the bridge. Now the bridge itself has 569 buttons. How do I know that? 312 days straight on board Celebrity Edge during a pandemic. We had a lot of time to count a lot of buttons. We had a lot of time to do very different things. The pandemic was a unique experience for us. We started out with 1,350 crew members on board the ship. Then when we were able to start repatriating people as the world was closing down. We got down to 1,075. But for the majority of the time that we were out of service, the 18 months, we had 112 crew members on a ship, 20 meters less than this ship right here. 112 crew members running a $1.2 billion ship. We had very different duties during that time. For example, I had deck 12. Deck 12 was my realm for flushing toilets, flushing sinks and showers to make sure that the water wasn't stagnant in the pipes. We had one gentleman, and I mention him quite often, his name's John, he's our horticulturist. He was looking after 5,000 living plants on board. I can't keep a microcactus alive, and this gentleman kept 5,000 living plants on board. But we did have a unique time. We got to do things, for example, Celebrity Edge was the first ship to put all of our crew into guest staterooms. And the reason that we did that was not because of COVID. It had nothing to do with the pandemic. When we said goodbye to our guests, and we were expecting them to come back within 2 weeks or a month, we thought that was a great opportunity for our crew members to experience what our guests got to experience, so that they could speak authentically to the product that we offer. So when they came back on board and the guest said, how do you like the infinite veranda? Or what do you think of the iconic suite? Because we did use those staterooms for different things. We used them as, we had crew members that got engaged during the pandemic. We had a wedding during the pandemic with 2 crew members who couldn't get back home to do their wedding. And the fun thing about that was the bride and groom were crew members on board Celebrity Edge. The bride's brother, also a crew member on Celebrity Edge. The bride's father was the executive chef on the Celebrity Reflection, which was anchored very close to us off of the Bahamas. And so the morning of the wedding, during this lockdown, we put one of our tender boats in the water. We went over to Celebrity Reflection. We picked up her father. We brought him on board. And as the bride, blindfolded, walked down the aft part of Eden, that beautiful ramp, her dad was there to meet her halfway and walk her the remainder of the way. So got to do some very, very special things during the pandemic, a time that I will always be grateful for because we got to know our crew members on a very different level. So now, back to the bridge. We have our ECTAs, we have our radars. Now the computer charts that we've got, I mentioned we don't carry any paper charts on board. We aren't even allowed to have paper charts as a backup. No, that's not allowed. So what we've got is we've got a backup computer for ECTAs. We have a backup for the backup computer. We have a backup for the backup's backup computer. And if all else fails, we have a sextant. A sextant is used for celestial navigation. Now, we are all trained in celestial navigation, and what celestial navigation is basically you take a celestial body, you bring it down to the horizon, you do a lot of mathematical calculations, and hopefully you can pinwheel your position on Earth's surface. Now, the thing about celestial navigation is you have to be able to see 2 things, a celestial body and the horizon. If you have one but not the other, you cannot do celestial navigation, and you basically have to wait it out until you can. But we do have backup systems, a few backup systems for our backup systems in the event that all else fails. There are also 2 chairs on the bridge. On the right-hand side or the starboard side is the officer of the watch's chair. On the left-hand side is the captain's chair. If I'm not on the bridge, the officers on watch are allowed to use that chair, but every time I go to the bridge, it is kind of a Celebrity Cruises thing. Whenever the captain enters the bridge, everyone stands. That's not my thing, it's just one of these things, one of these traditions that they have out of respect for the captain. They do not announce captain on deck, no matter how many times I've tried to get them to do that. But it's fine, we make do. So that is some information about the bridge. I also want to mention the engines, because a lot of times we get questions about the engines. We have 5 main engines on board. The fuel that we use is either heavy fuel oil or marine gas oil, MGO. MGO, marine gas oil, is like jet fuel. Very expensive, very clean. Heavy fuel oil, what happens with our heavy fuel oil, when we burn it, we have a scrubber system on board Celebrity Beyond, and that means as the exhaust gases from the heavy fuel oil are traveling up the ship's stack, we have sprinkler heads in the stack, which are shooting out an alkali water mixture. Now, the alkali in the water mixture is separating the sulfur content, so the sulfur is dropping down and it's going into holding tanks. So the plume that you see, and we do say it's plume, when you look at our ship stack, that is not smoke, that is plume, because that has been, the exhaust has gone through the scrubber system, which evaporates very quickly, and it is less than 0.5% sulfur content. And this is required from environmental agencies around the world to make sure that we are running in the cleanest way that we can. Now, we are looking at alternate fuels for the future. For example, our sister ship, Celebrity Ascent, which is coming out at the end of this year, will have an alternate fuel on board. I don't know if they've announced it officially, so I don't want to say it here because that spreads like wildfire, but she will have an alternate fuel system on board. The icon of the seas is LNG. We have different, we're looking at methanol products. We will not do nuclear power because a lot of ports around the world are not keen on seeing nuclear powered ships sailing in and out of their ports on a regular basis. So at this time, nuclear power is not an option, but they are looking at different fuel options for many, many of the ships. As far as our fuel efficiency, we do have a couple of things that impact us. For example, our paint on our ship's hull is made out of silicone, so we slide right through the water, making us more fuel efficient. We also have a system called ALS, Air Lubrication System. This is, everybody's familiar with the soda stream machine where you can make your own soda pop? It's kind of the same idea. We have holes in the side of the ship that are supposed to be there, and what's coming out of those holes are billions of tiny bubbles that coat the ship's hull. So it makes us very hydrodynamic going through the water. We're basically floating in one gigantic bubble. So the ALS system also gives us about a half knot of extra speed. We have stabilizers on board. These look like wings of an airplane that we extend from either side of the ship, one on each side. They're fully automatic. So when the ship is cruising, if we start rolling from side to side, we'll extend them out. When we roll to starboard, the port fin will actually dig in, fully automatic, and upright us. They reduce the rolling up to 90%. Now this is rolling from side to side with the ship, not pitching, which is the forward and aft motion. Let's see, what else? Oh, we make our own water on board the ship. So what we do is we take in our seawater, and it goes through a purification process, it goes through an osmosis process. Basically, we're separating the salt out so that this is the water that's ending up in your sinks, in your toilets, in your showers, in the galley. Now once that water is used, it will go into different holding tanks. The water from your sinks and your showers will go into gray water tanks, and it goes through a purification process, and the end result gets pumped over the side. It's clean enough to pump it over the side. The black water is the water from your toilets. Now once you flush that toilet, that water goes through all of our piping systems and then into the advanced wastewater purification process, where it separates the solids from the liquids. The solids go off and get dehydrated, and the end result looks like a brown hockey puck, for lack of a better description. The liquids, again, go through this purification process, and the U.S. Coast Guard has deemed that that water is clean enough to drink. We don't drink it. But what we do is we bottle it. And we sell it to Carnival Corporation. They love it. I don't know, something about a sweet aftertaste, trust them. Just kidding. But we do have our environmental practices and policies. We have a Save the Waste policy where nothing gets thrown overboard. We've gone a long way with single-use plastics. When you go up to the ocean view, we don't have the single condiments in your bathrooms, for example. The bath amenities aren't the single-use plastics. We've eliminated plastic straws and so on and so forth. So very, very proud of what not only Celebrity Cruises, but our Royal Caribbean group does to protect the environment, because obviously this is our livelihood. Now, next picture. Okay, and you can see it, you can be it. Social media, very quickly want to mention, when I started with Celebrity Cruises in 2015, coming in as a captain, the their PR department said, you should probably start social media. I had no idea what Instagram and all of that stuff was. But the fact is, when I was growing up, the only thing I saw about cruise ships was the Love Boat. And as much as I love the Love Boat and Captain Stubing, it's not an actual depiction of what happens day to day on board a cruise ship. So the reason that I have social media is to show a glimpse into the real life and the very cool things that we get to do while we're at sea, to hopefully garner interest in people who never even thought about this as a career option. It was also a great way to stay connected to our guests and our crew during the pandemic, to show you kind of those things that were going on, because during the pandemic, especially during the initial part of the pandemic, what you were seeing about cruise ships on the news was not the reality that we were living on board. So we wanted to give a real depiction of what was actually happening at sea, so sharing that with the world, and hopefully also getting an interest in people going to sea, because it is the greatest career that you could ever imagine. So that's a little about social media. Now, the last thing I want to show you before we open it up to Q&A, and I hope I haven't gone too long, but one of the questions I get asked very often is, what's the most unusual thing that you have seen at sea? Now, I've been at sea for 26 years, but during the pandemic, we had a lot of unique experiences, as I've already mentioned. One of those happened in June of 2020, Every evening at 7:30, we would do a Hope Floats horn salute, and that started very early in the pandemic when we were at anchor outside of the Bahamas. Initially, we had about 9 cruise ships that were anchored near us, different companies, Holland America, Carnival, Royal Caribbean, Celebrity. And somebody had said on social media, isn't it sad when you look out and you see all of these empty ships floating around you? I had the complete opposite reaction. To me, when I looked out and I saw those ships, it was comforting to know that we weren't alone. So I sent an email to all the captains on the ships around us, and I said, would you join us at 7:30 every night, blow your horn in our Hope Floats horn salute? And that was to let our crew members on board, let them know that we were safe, we were healthy, we were happy, and we were hoping the same for everyone back home. We continued to blow our horn until June 26th of 2021, when Celebrity Edge was the first ship to sail out of the U.S. With our guests back on board. So it was something that the crew members looked forward to each evening after dinner, especially when there's only 112 of you on board. We would go out on deck. We would listen to the ships around us blowing their horns. We would watch the sunset. And on this particular evening, I had taken my drone up, because we would throw the drone up from time to time to catch the sunset, get some really nice shots of the ship. But I had my drone in my hand. I had missed the sunset, but we were out on deck, and this happened. I'll show you. Jellyfish. And if I had to guess the size, I would probably say it was at least 3 meters wide, it's about 9 feet, and anywhere from 15 to 20 feet long. It made no noise, so it wasn't a drone. Like I said, we were outside of the Bahamas. The nearest ship was over 2 miles away. We didn't have very much wind, and even at that height in the airstreams. But what it did is it started at the bow of the ship, and it floated directly down the center line of the ship, and then it disappeared. And people say, you know, why didn't you put a boat in the water? Well, it was after sunset. I don't know what that thing was, and our boats are limited with their lights, so I didn't really want to put people in a boat to go look for something that we weren't sure what it was. But it disappeared, and to this date, I have no idea what it was. But I have had different shows, paranormal shows in particular, contact and asked to use that video, and they've had experts try and dissect it, but they aren't able to figure out what it is either. So to date, that is one of the most unusual things that I have seen at sea. All right, so that is it for my presentation, but I'm going to open it up to questions and answers. So I think we've got a few. Oh, Tim's running around with the microphone. Awesome. Remember the rule about the technical questions? If we could just in school, I mean, sometimes it can take an entire school year to make friends, but on this ship, we just bonded instantly. And I thought, you know, there was a really warm feeling that I got from that alone. Had nothing to do with the nautical aspect of the ship, but just kind of that environment and the availability to make friends and have fun. And I thought, that's what these people do for their careers, and that's pretty cool. So I think that was what kind of stood with me.
So I think what the captain's trying to say is the cruise directors are inspirational.
Big time. And I have to say, you saw my certificate. So when I was doing a presentation, when I first took over Celebrity Summit, and I was talking about this, the cruise director on Celebrity Summit saw my certificate. He said, that's funny, my dad was a cruise director, and he sailed with that captain. His dad was the cruise director on my cruise, and now the cruise director, as a captain, I had him on my ship. So it went absolutely full circle. It's a very small world. Big love to cruise directors. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure we could go all the day long with questions, but we've got to stop it there for now. Please join me. Say a huge thank you to Captain Kate! Everyone have a great day!
Good, good.